bring you the big picture as the economic survey pointed it out, both the positives and, of course, the challenges in the road ahead. And I want to start with the key positives that have been highlighted in the Economic Survey 2026. Number one, robust economic growth. The headline GDP number is estimated to be 7.4% for FY26. It's driven primarily by strong domestic demand, reflecting resilience across consumption as well as investment. So that's the big picture. India is still in the high growth trajectory. Second, inflation is contained and well below the RBI's guidance. The average inflation between April and December fell to a record low of 1.7%. That is far lower than the RBI's guidance of under 4%, and that provides stability for households as well as for businesses. Fiscal health has been very, very strong, especially central government fiscal health. Capital expenditure reached 4% of GDP in FY25, while the fiscal deficit was contained at under 5%, and that demonstrates disciplined fiscal management. Next, despite the Trump tariffs, despite the global trading order being completely upended, there have been record exports. Total exports touched an all-time high of $825 billion in FY25, underscoring India's growing presence in the global markets. This is despite the tariff shock that we saw, particularly in the second half of 2025. Moving to employment growth, and this has been a persistent concern, particularly in the post-COVID years. Over 31 crore unorganized workers have been registered on the eShram portal. More than 10 lakh new jobs were created in the manufacturing sector. But youth unemployment at 17% as per MSME data is a cause of concern, and unemployment has been a lagging problem for a number of quarters now. And finally, there's also the healthy banking sector. The gross non-performing asset ratio has declined multi-decade low of just 2.2% in the month of September 2025. That reflects improved asset quality as well as financial stability. So all in all, these indicators collectively highlight India is in a strong, stable and forward-looking position. How will Budget 2026 take this forward? That's what we will discuss with our special CII roundtable in just a moment. But I want to first play out what the Chief Economic Advisor said as the eco-survey was tabled in Parliament.
India is an indeed oasis of macro stability in otherwise a turbulent world. Numbers speak for themselves. Our GDP for this financial year is estimated, this is all IMF forecast, may differ slightly from what MSME has told us. IMF predicts 7.3% for the year ending March 2026. We have 7.4 from MSME. We are projecting on the back of domestic accomplishments and domestic reforms that the growth momentum is intact, and we will be able to grow at between 6.8 and 7.2% in real terms. More importantly, we are achieving these high growth rates, consumption and investment spending amidst very moderate inflation environment. However, it's important to note that core inflation is also well behaved. If you take out gold and silver, core inflation is 2.9, well below the 4% threshold with which the headline inflation is pursued.
Joined by a very special CII panel to try and make sense of not just the economic survey, but what to expect when the Finance Minister presents the budget on the 1st of February. Mr. R. Mukundan is President-Designate of the CII and Managing Director and CEO of Tata Chemicals. Mr. Chandrajit Banerjee is Director General of CII. Dr. Suchitra Ella, Vice President of CII and Co-Founder and Managing Director at Bharat Biotech. Mr. Deepak Shetty is CII Council on Manufacturing Excellence and CEO and MD of JCB India Limited. And Mr. Vineet Mittal is Co-Chairman of CII Energy Transition and Chairman of the Avada Group. Thank you very much to our special guests for joining us here on this special budget programming. I want to start with you, Mr. Mukundan, taking off from what the economic survey has said, and you just heard the Chief Economic Advisor. The survey is forecasting in a range of 6.8 to 7.2%. The MSME projection is 7.4. IMF projection is 7.3. The headline looks extremely compelling. It shows that India, its macroeconomic stability, its growth trajectory. What do you think would be the Finance Minister's priority areas, 1, 2, 3, as she rises to present the budget on the 1st of February?
Thank you, Zaka. I think fundamentally, let me start by saying that the actions we've taken in this very, very volatile environment have come out very positive for us and have stood the test of time. I think we must compliment the government for reaching out and making sure we open the economy by signing so many of the FTAs, which have really worked well for us. Barring one FTA, they've almost rounded up most of the big FTAs as we speak. The second big issue for us is that, as you mentioned, the finances of India are in good condition, whether it be the RBI forex reserves, whether you talk about the fiscal deficit glide path, whether you talk about the banking sector itself, which you spoke very, very critical for MSME. I think that's the oil and the engine which keeps the economy going. I think that's also in a good shape. And several new policy which have been done as a, let's say, reform 2.0, or whatever you want to call it, whether it be labor codes, whether it be looking at the direct taxes, and right now looking at indirect taxes, are all positive steps which government has moved. And I think this is being reflected by action by the industry. And when I say action by the industry, if you look at the export resilience, despite the volatility, I think that's the action which industry has responded to the call by the government. And it's been a very close partnership. I think in terms of the focus, the economic survey actually lays out several new areas to focus on. And let me touch upon the new areas where we will get into the traditional areas. For example, emphasis on artificial intelligence. How is India going to scale up in AI? Yeah. Then emphasis on what I would call climate adaptation rather than climate mitigation. India needs to do a lot more adaptation, and rightly the economic survey has highlighted that. In addition to that, it is focused back on MSME sector, which is one of the backbone of Indian economy. And fundamentally, it says the following, that all three sectors which we want to focus, which is agriculture, which is manufacturing, and the service sector, and provides a slew of recommendations for all of them. But if you were to ask me on an overall basis what we should be looking at, I think we need a continuity, we need stability, but at the same time, remove the irritants out of the way. And those irritants have been highlighted to government.
I want to ask Mr. Chandrajit Banerjee this. One of the facets over the last 4 or 5 years, particularly in the post-COVID times, has been increased public sector expenditure, particularly Capex, has increased substantially over the last few years. In fact, the FY26 projection by the budget was 11.2 lakh crores. We will see what the revised estimates are when the budget is presented. But 11 lakh crores is a lot of money. Have we now got to the stage where the public expenditure Capex is sort of hitting a ceiling now? Now it's time for the private sector, and people have been talking about this gross fixed capital formation as a percentage of GDP has gone down from 34% that it used to be more than 10 years ago to under 30% now. People talk about the animal spirits. Why are we not seeing that as much, particularly in the last couple of years or so?
I think we have gone past that. It was a question which was there about 2 years back or so, whether the private sector was investing. But if you really see that recent data of the last 6 months and a little more, the private sector's Capex participation, or rather Capex, has increased significantly, and actually it shows a high. And many sectors like the cement or the steel or even the renewable sector, they have actually enhanced capital expenditure, and that growth year on year public sector investments on Capex have really helped us in terms of getting this picked up. And India was one of the very few countries which stuck out its neck to put in so much of public sector public Capex, and that was required therefore we stood out in the globe, and the private sector has duly kicked in over the last few months, and I'm seeing sectors across sectors which are now reporting greater than 75-80% of capacity utilization. Coupled with that, there is also a very strong increase in consumption. The GST 2.0 has helped in it. And third, of course, there is a strong rise in the rural demand, which also will give rise to a lot of private sector participation coming in. I want to come to a very specific point when you raise Capex and state Capex, and I think there is a need for us to move also to the state level, that is the states of India.
Correct.
And I think that's where I think we need some incentivization of infrastructure spent by the states, prudent investment into infrastructure and roadways, and that really would help a lot into the private sector come in further, which will also in turn reduce the cost of logistics and doing business. I'll end with one more point which you have flagged while you were talking about the highlights of the economic survey, and I think the economic survey talks about a phenomenal partnership between the private sector, the state, and the the citizens of India. And if you really look at the chapter 16 of the economic survey, it's one of the very, very outstanding chapters, I would think, which talks about the intricacies of this collaboration for India to maintain that sustained high growth. And that would be possible if also the private sector has its responsibilities, as was mentioned with regards to AI and upgradation of technology, research and development. All of that would need to be coupled in. And I think it's a great story ahead.
I want to ask Dr. Suchitra Ella, we've talked about this health and education being not given as much allocation, as much importance as, let's say, public sector expenditure when it comes to Capex. It has been sort of in that 1.8, 1.9, less than 2% mark. There was, I think, a slight bump up right after COVID, around the COVID time, right after that. But again, we've gone back to under 2% in terms of health. Again, education is about 4% or so. Do you think that's just a consequence of the stage of development that India is in right now? Or do you think that that will also need to be given equal emphasis just as much as building physical infrastructure is concerned, whether it's highways, expressways, airports, ports, etc.?
Zaka, I think it's extremely important that we continue to work on education and health because it is kind of like a non-starter, or it just needs to continue this momentum. We need to build on what has been done before. We've been gradually noticing the increase in the allotment and the the focus that has come into these two areas over the last years in the recent past. And I'm sure this is very positive for us because we need to build on this. We have to give equal importance, in my opinion, because education is one thing that is going to also prepare the future of this, of the country, the nation, the 2047, the Viksit Bharat, that all of us have to bring forth to the table. And health, of course, doesn't get left behind. Because it is always a kind of these are two eyes which connects to the public, to the citizens of India. And this is the future of India that we are talking about in terms of the mental preparedness, the communicable, non-communicable diseases, the nutrition issues that we have to tackle, the public health services and the private health services, affordability.
Sorry, what about use of artificial intelligence in healthcare? The West is using that in a big way.
Artificial intelligence will come, Zaka, but it would have to be experimented. We need models to work on within our diversity is something, we are like a mini world ourselves here. And we need to work on such platforms to screen for prevention, for monitoring. Yes, artificial intelligence would be extremely useful, even for clinical research, data mining, data management. I'm sure these are going to be absolutely wonderful tools for us to look forward to, implement and bring into our own environments of manufacturing and research. See, research is something that's going to be, that has to be taken up in a way much more than how we have done it in the past. And we have this recently, the 1 lakh crore budget for the R&D and innovation that was also announced by the government of India also goes to show that we have placed our, focus in the right track. And it's for all of us, public and private, to get together and push that momentum forward.
Let me also get Mr. Deepak Shetty into this conversation at a time when, there's a lot of talk around tariffs, and the tariffs have sort of roiled the global trading order. India's exports have shown very robust growth at $825 billion at the end of the financial year. I just want to understand from you, sir, how much more cushioning does industry expect from government, particularly exporters? There are these labor-intensive sectors like textiles, apparel, footwear, etc., which have been pretty significantly hit because of the American tariffs. But how much can that be offset, for example, with the India-EU FTA that just got announced this week?
Yeah. So, Zagat, I think first of all, I want to compliment the CEA for a very positive update on the economic survey, which laid the basis with the 6.8 to 7.2% growth, particularly the advanced GDP at 7.4%, duly supported by IMF at 7.3%. And before I answer you, I want to add to what Mr. Banerjee, you asked Mr. Banerjee about, infrastructure or Capex related,
Yeah.
we have not hit the ceiling. I think there's still a lot to do. I'll just give you an example. In 10 years, the roads have been enhanced from 91,000 kilometers to 146,000 kilometers. Now, what we have already built need to be maintained, need to be enhanced. So certainly there is an investment which is required for it. At the same time, we need more to build more roads, and also particularly the point about the state economy. I think today it is very important. The growth will not only come with the big highways, it will also come through the rural roads, reducing the distance between farm to market. I think the whole focus on rural infrastructure will be very, very critical. So I really second what CI has recommended, a 12% growth, because last 2 years, probably it has been a flatlined a bit. So from around 11.2 lakh crores to almost 12.6 lakh crores is the sort of wish list or the request that CI has made. I think it is very important that we continue to focus on infrastructure development. Now coming to your question, coming to your question on exports, I think it's a great opportunity for India to really leverage the FTAs which have been signed. You mentioned about EU FTA. I just wanted to make a point that unlike with other developed economies where the services sector is sort of having the larger share of the exports from India, if you look at the present exports from India to EU, out of the $79 billion, the services sector is $30 billion. So almost $49 billion is manufacturing. And with the FTA, this opportunity will certainly grow. Also, we have almost 6,000 European companies who have invested in India.
Yeah.
I think it's a great opportunity for MSME sector in India to grow both from the capability point of view, from the technology point of view. And I think today when the global economies, and particularly in the EU market, are also looking at diversifying their supply base from X country plus one, I think it is a very, very good opportunity for the Indian industry.
I also
and
want to
any
ask,
support,
Mr. Vineet Mittal is also there on the broadcast with us on the CII roundtable. Mr. Mittal, about the energy transition has been a process here in India since 2014. The Prime Minister had given an ambitious target, I think, of 500 gigawatts. At a time, again, when we are seeing Mr. Trump saying, I want to go back to fossil fuels and fracking and so on and so forth, and he wants to control rare earths, supply chains, etc. Where are we in this entire sort of game of energy transition, as it were? We've also seen recent pressures on, import of Russian oil, etc. Are we on track to meet those energy challenges? And again, I want to come back to, AI and feeding its energy needs, because that's again like a major energy drainer. You have to build these massive GCCs. Of course, the big tech companies are all wanting to invest in India. But are we prepared for that transition? Are we on course for that transition?
So, thank you. If you look at in the last 12 years, India has added more than 20 times capacity in the solar, and it continues to add 50 to 60 gigawatt of green energy every year. And now we are globally top 3 market when it comes to energy transition. And our budget is coming actually at a very important moment for India. We are no longer just a fast growing economy. We are becoming a system shaping economy. And the choices we make today will decide whether India is only a large market or also the hub for green global production and innovation hub. And as you rightly said, that energy sits at heart of that choice. Every data center, every electric vehicle, every digital service, or even a factory depends on reliable, affordable green power. And today, I'm happy to share that India is the most competitive when it comes to supplying the green energy round the clock to data center or factory. We are able to do almost 40-50% cheaper than US. The biggest challenge in the US for data center is that they need 60 gigawatt of additional power over next 4 years, and their grid connection is taking 4 to 5 years time frame. If India plans to have the data localization policy, like say YouTube roughly has more than half billion Indian users, and they are the biggest content creator on Insta, Facebook, and other social media. If those content itself can be localized through the act, you are looking at 10 gigawatt plus of data center requirement. And today, India is power sufficient. We have 510 gigawatt of grid connection and power which is available, and additional more than 280 gigawatt which is supposed to happen by 2030. And a lot of it is already tendered out.
Okay.
So India can become actually the global hub for building data center, AI hyperscaler, and there are multiple cities where there is a low latency and
Okay.
multiple
Let
optical
me
fibers are coming.
Let me ask Mr. Mugundan, coming back again to the big picture, taking off from what the economic survey has flagged, a couple of things. One is the strength of the rupee. The rupee has, I think, fallen 7% through 2025 and through the first month of 2026. Also, it has asked some questions about, FDI and FII net outflows. How would you view that, Mr. Mugundan? Is that a cause of concern?
So there's been a long discussion on this, Zaka. I think firstly, I would go back to what the chief economic advisor himself has said. The rupee dollar ratio can flip on a dime. You sign one more FTA, it may just switch other side. So I think let's not go into that part. I think there is a clear policy which government has that they want to ensure that our exporters remain competitive. And I think, and they've done a proper calculation and economic survey which sort of tells that between import and export, this slide which is happening is probably in India's interest rather than not. And they've showed a very clear econometric model. So I would go with the fact that I think India has managed this entire process well, and we have responded extremely well in terms of import, export, and the current account deficit stability. So I think that's on the side of where rupee needs to be and what it is doing. In terms of the overall issue of FI and FPI portfolio investors, I think really we should look at what is coming as real investment to put steel and cement on the ground. This is fundamentally what has happened in the last few quarters is India was an outperformer and people have taken money off the table, which is fine by any investor to do. And I think once this table sets are set clear, which is happening now, I think we should see them coming back again. So I don't think we should be responding to that with, we should do what is within our control. We should continue to focus on sensible policies. These should not be defining the way we need to move. If we do that, I think both the FPI and FII flows as well as the rupee will find the right level which we want to be.
So I want to come back to Mr. Chandrajit Banerjee. While like I said, the headline picture is great. Where GDP, the survey forecast between 6.8 and 7.2. What about the situation of MSMEs? Some MSMEs are still complaining despite the PLIs, and the PLIs have been very successful, but it's not taken everybody under the big tent, as it were. MSMEs are still complaining of credit stress. There is compliance overload when it comes to the new indirect tax systems. There are delayed payments. Also, access to credit has been a concern for them. Are these issues that you also encounter when you speak to your small industry, your medium-sized industry cells within CIA, and is this something that you've had in your conversations with government as well?
So Zaka, this is I'm so glad that you raised the issue of MSME, and that is sort of a backbone for even the large companies. I'll give you just a couple of points, and I really would like to refer to again because you have a very well alluded to the economic survey over quite a few times. If you really look at the economic survey and what it has said, it has talked about the crucial role of the MSME. It has talked about how MSME should be a crucial role in moving towards a more, towards scale competitiveness. Competitiveness was something which was, and deeper integration with the GVC. And the third piece that they talked about was how can the MSME itself have an effective policy design which will help them not just remain as isolated firms, but position them as a cluster. Now, therefore, what I would think, looking out from there, the focus on MSME today, if you see, it is a very, very important integral part of Indian manufacturing, which needs to grow from the mid-teens to the 20s. Mid-20s is what our aims are, right? Unless the small and the mid-sized companies grow, it wouldn't. So what we need here is a capital support scheme for participation with the MSMEs, and we look forward to that in the budget in some format, where we see a major push of risk capital availability to the and patient capital availability to the mid-size and the small companies. So, and my last point on the MSMEs would be how does the private sector then turn in to see to it that it collaborates with the smaller and the mid-sized companies to see look at how they can integrate them, build their competitiveness through digital transformation, through the support, because MSME is a sector which is actually going to increase employment, which is actually going to lead to the greater amount of exports, Zaka, which you spoke about also. So I would think we'll need a lot more for the MSME sector in the budget, and I look forward to that very strong point in the intervention.
Dr. Ella, we've talked about physical infrastructure, highways, airports, ports, etc., but there's also digital highways, and already, the digital economy in the country is contributing more than 10% of GDP. We talked about AI and how we need to have a deep AI backbone and AI infrastructure, which of course some of the big tech companies, Google, etc., have already announced their investment plans in Andhra Pradesh. What more do you think government needs to do to encourage India to become a serious AI player? We're not quite there. I think all the AI money seems to be either in the US or of course now in China in a big way.
We need to look at AI capabilities in India by needing to complement and also providing the institutional support that is required for startups and universities, because these are our educational institutions. And the startups, of course, also are generally off of their classrooms and from their academic institutions. So they are brand new, pitching with new ideas and coming forth with solutions for developing further services and products. So I think the recommendations for us would be to establish a national AI computing grid kind of a platform under a PPP kind of a model, because it is best served that way, Zaka. I believe strongly in that. We ourselves have proven many technologies in the healthcare and in vaccines in particular, in drug development and discovery, when we can collate and bring our strengths together in private and public partnerships. And academic institutes play a huge role in how we can take this forward. So I think this is very important that we bring in the public-private partnerships, so that this focus will continue to remain, and also start auguring more work and progress in the AI and in the areas that AI can support, because AI is going to be another enormous tool for all of us, irrespective of the sectors that we come from. So I think it is not something that's just going to service one or two of us. So we need to look at it in a very collective perspective and a very long-term perspective, so that we also then complement our own skill set. We also need to develop our skill set here. De-skilling probably is also required, Zaka, because the last 20, 25 years, we have gone in and skilled our, the future of this country, the children in a certain way. And now we are talking AI, because technologies are changing fast by the decade sometimes itself. So we need to also de-skill. And
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Ella, Mr. Banerjee, Mr. Mugundan, Mr. Shetty, and Mr. Mittal. We look forward to a progressive budget, a budget that puts growth at the front and center and also addresses concerns, whether it's from the exporters, whether it's from the MSMEs. Hope to have you back again on Budget Day. Thank you very much to our CIA panelists for joining us on this budget special broadcast. I want to move on now to other stories that we're tracking tonight on Brass Tacks. Tensions are ramping up in the Middle East. It's been surging for the last few weeks. The United States continues to deploy additional warships towards the Iranian waters. Tehran, meanwhile, is vowing a powerful and almost unprecedented response if the American military takes action. A second U.S. military campaign in Iran. Remember, just 6 months ago in June, America and Israel had carried out a massive 12-day bombing campaign. Depending on the scope and scale of the second campaign, if one were to be started, That could be far more destabilizing than what we saw back in June. Can Donald Trump replicate the Venezuela model in Iran, or is Iran vastly different from Venezuela? I explore that topic.
And I'm going to do that for Greenland. Or the respect within the countries.
US President Donald Trump reiterated his threats against Iran this week, and he's now set to be considering another preemptive war against Iran. Whether or not this will get rid of the Ayatollah regime, that is still an open question. But Trump posted on social media earlier this week that Tehran's leaders have to make a deal to stop their nuclear program, or they will be hell to pay. There is nothing on the ground to show that Iran has made any significant progress in the last 6 months to enhance its nuclear program. Back in June of last year, America and Israel had carried out massive bombings on 3 of Iran's top nuclear sites. At that time, Trump had triumphantly declared that Iran's nuclear program had been obliterated. But now he's making the same threat again and offering the same carrot of nuclear talks at the same time. As a result, there are multiple questions about the timing and the motive behind Trump's saber-rattling. Are his threats simply intended to bring Iran back to the nuclear negotiation table? Would a military strike, if it happens, against the nuclear program only be a pretext to oust Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader? Why have Trump's stated reasons for targeting Iran shifted back to the nuclear program after he initially said he was seeking to defend the protesters? In fact, he had explicitly told those protesters on social media that help is on its way. They had mounted a powerful challenge to the regime, but the regime crushed it down. Trump was asked about it in this week's cabinet meeting, and this is what he had to say.
I have had, and I am planning on it, yeah. We have a lot of very big, very powerful ships sailing to Iran right now, and it would be great if we didn't have to use them. Well, I told him 2 things. Number 1, no nuclear, and number 2, stop killing protesters. They're killing them by the thousands. You know, I stopped 837 hangings 2 weeks ago, but they're going to have to do something. Nobody's seen anything like this.
A second American military campaign in Iran, depending on its scope and scale, could be far more destabilizing to the region. And here's why. First among them is the belief inside the White House that the recent protests in Iran, combined with the dire economic situation in the country, have so weakened the regime that American or Israeli military action could hasten the collapse of the regime. Second, an assessment among Israeli intelligence agencies is that an Iranian counter-strike using ballistic missiles could focus on large cities in Israel and not any other part of the region, including American military bases in the Middle East. Israel had successfully defended Iranian missile attacks last summer. The Department of War has backed up President Trump's threats, beginning with a large military buildup in the Middle East. That includes the USS Abraham Lincoln, one of the biggest aircraft carriers in the world, various destroyer ships that are capable of firing long-range missiles, fighter jets, refueling capabilities, missile defenses have all, an entire armada has been flown into the Persian Gulf.
When President Trump said, we're not getting a nuclear Iran, you won't have a nuclear bomb, he meant it. And we sent those B-2s halfway around the world, and they never noticed. When he said, we're not going to tolerate trafficking drugs anymore in our hemisphere, we treat them like the Al-Qaeda of the Western Hemisphere, he meant it, and we're executing that. When you said, Mr. President, we're securing the border, the military was proud to do their part alongside Homeland Security to do that. Same thing with Iran right now, ensuring that they have all the options to make a deal. They should not pursue nuclear capabilities. We will be prepared to deliver whatever this president expects of the War Department.
But Trump officials are not very clear about what the objective of such a military operation would be, even if the president gave his go-ahead for one. Secretary of State Marco Rubio was pressed at a Senate hearing this week about what would happen if Iran's government were to fall. What replaces it? He didn't seem to have a very definitive answer, but he gave ample indication that an attack on Iran could be imminent. For all you know, it could also be a bluff. With the Trump folks, one can never tell.
So I don't think anyone can give you a simple answer as to what happens next in Iran if the supreme leader and the regime were to fall, other than the hope that there would be some ability to have somebody within their systems that you could work towards a similar transition. I would imagine it would be even far more complex than the one we're describing now, because you're talking about a regime that's in place for a very long time. So that's going to require a lot of careful thinking if that eventuality ever presents itself. We have to have enough force and power in the region, just on a baseline, to defend against that possibility. That at some point, as a result of something, the Iranian regime decides to strike at our true presence in the region. The president always reserves the preemptive defensive option.
Trump officials say the president may be taking a similar approach to Iran as he did to Venezuela, where the United States amassed forces just off the coast for months as part of a pressure campaign to oust Nicolas Maduro. Efforts to convince Maduro to leave Venezuela failed, and in that case, it led to an American attack. The Delta forces in a special operation attacked the presidential palace. They captured Maduro and his wife. But here's the thing, Iran is not Venezuela. It has sophisticated military options, including ballistic and cruise missiles. It's got terror proxies in the Middle East, from Houthis to Hezbollah to Hamas, all of which may be considerably weakened after a sustained war with Israel, but they are still useful cannon fodder. And most importantly, the Iranian regime is not a one-man enterprise. While Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is the supreme leader, there are multiple power centers. There is the Guardian Council, which has overriding powers, and now increasingly the Revolutionary Guards, or the IRGC, who are an elite military force numbering about 150,000, who answer only to the supreme leader. They are ideologically sworn to protect the regime and not the people. Also, in Venezuela, as is being increasingly apparent now, the Americans cut a deal with Maduro's number two, Delcy Rodriguez, and her powerful brother Jorge Rodriguez, to sell out Maduro. Delcy was quickly replaced as the head of the country after Maduro was ousted, but in Iran, there is no such visible successor to Khamenei. Neither is there any large-scale desertion from the top brass of the IRGC over to the side of the protesters. So for now, the iron hand of the state in Iran has prevailed over the protesters. The protests have been crushed, and the game of who blinks first with America has just begun. Well, it's the beginning of yet another chapter in the Trump versus Carney saga. Canada has now sent a stern warning to the United States, emphasizing that its sovereignty must be respected amid rising tensions between Ottawa and Washington. Prime Minister Mark Carney has urged President Trump and U.S. authorities to recognize Canada's autonomy and its sovereignty after a meeting recently happened between separatists in Alberta and officials of the Trump administration. Will this new chapter further escalate tensions between the two North American neighbors? Here's the full story.
As you know from real estate, there are some places that are never for sale.
That's true.
We're sitting in one right now, Buckingham Palace, that you visited as well.
That's true.
And having met with the owners of Canada over the course of the campaign last several months, it's not for sale, won't be for sale.
A new territorial spat is brewing in the already troubled relationship between US and Canada. According to a report in the Financial Times, since April 2025, the US State Department officials have thrice met with leaders of a group that wants to see the province of Alberta secede from Canada. The group, named the Alberta Prosperity Project, has been pushing for a referendum on Alberta independence and reportedly plans to ask US Treasury officials for a $500 billion line of credit to support the transition to a free and independent Alberta. The White House downplayed any US involvement, but Prime Minister Mark Carney said he expects President Donald Trump to respect Canadian sovereignty.
We expect the US administration to respect Canadian sovereignty. I'm always clear in my conversation with President Trump to that effect, and then move on to what we can do together.
Alberta is an oil-rich province in Western Canada, roughly the size of Texas in America. Home to about 5 million people, Alberta is dubbed the Energy Province. It has oil sands that account for about 84% of Canada's total crude oil production. Politically, it is considered the bastion of conservatism in Canada. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith has been on good terms with Trump and paid him a visit at his Mar-a-Lago estate in January 2025. Even though her counterparts in other provinces joined forces against Trump and his threats to annex Canada. The Alberta Prosperity Project defines itself as an educational and advocacy initiative focused on promoting what it describes as Alberta's prosperity, self-determination and independence. According to its website, the organization aims to build public support for a future in which Alberta has far greater control over its political and economic destiny, either within Canada or as a sovereign entity. The APP has been pushing for a referendum asserting that Alberta should be strong, free and sovereign, and gathering authority for governance areas that are currently shared with or controlled by the federal government. The group also states that Alberta should create its own constitution for and with Albertans. With pro-oil Conservative Trump back in the White House, it has buoyed the secession movement in Alberta. Top Trump officials have also showed support for Albertans seeking independence. US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said that Alberta is a natural partner for the US and that they want what the US has got. Bessent claimed Canada won't let Alberta build an oil pipeline to the Pacific and said, "I think we should let them come down into the US." Carney and Trump's tense relationship has worsened since the Canadian Prime Minister visited China and reset Ottawa's ties with Xi Jinping. Trump threatened to slap a 100% tariff on Canadian goods if the country strikes a trade deal with China.
Well, it's very dangerous for them to do that, and it's even more dangerous, I think, for Canada to get into business with China. Canada's not doing well. They're doing very poorly, and you can't look at China as the answer.
Later, at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Carney's speech was a big rebuke of Trump. Without naming the US president, Carney said the US-led world order had been ruptured. He also urged other middle powers to band together in the face of economic coercion by greater powers.
Let's now go across to Mr. Hamid Raza Ghulamzadeh, who's an Iranian strategic affairs expert. He's the director at Diplo House. Thank you very much, Mr. Hamid Raza. First things first, Mr. Trump and his officials, whether it's the Secretary of State or other officials, have been really ramping up the rhetoric as well as ramping up, all this armada, so-called armada that they're moving to the Persian Gulf. It has an aircraft carrier, multiple fighter jets, transport aircraft, refueling aircraft. What do you think is the attempt here? Is the attempt to try and put pressure on the regime of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, much like they built pressure in Venezuela a few months ago, and then eventually the leader there, was removed in an operation by the American forces. Is this a pressure-imposing tactic, or is there a genuine threat of an American attack on Iran?
Actually, the short answer is that it's a wishful thinking. Venezuela and Iran are in no ways comparable together. And it is totally a different story, what happened in Venezuela and whatever could be possibly happening in Iran. Because Iran is totally different. Iran has its own defensive capabilities, which is very genuine and indigenous. And Iran is a very bigger country than Venezuela. And Iran has learned how to survive in this volatile region of the world that we are living in West Asia. And Iran has proved that during the 12-day war that is not going to bring into its knees, and it would be resisting against any attacks from outside.
So why then is the Trump administration doing this? Why are they moving such a large armada of weapons and weaponry? He also, over the last couple of days, has been, saying on social media that the Iranian regime should make a deal on the nuclear issue. Again, we thought this was not about the nuclear issue. This was about, the protesters and the actions that have been taken by the Iranian state against the protesters. Suddenly now we're back to the nuclear issue. Why do you think that is?
That's the wishful thinking part that I mentioned, because part of his administration and his allies are selling this idea to him that Iran is at its weakest point, as Marco Rubio has just said yesterday. And they think that they might might actually be able to attack Iran and to topple the establishment here in Iran. But he's wrong. What he is doing is considering this possibility, and he's bringing that beautiful armada, as he's saying, quote unquote, and to bring here. First, maybe they can frighten Iranians, and by bullying Iranians into some negotiations, they can actually have some benefits and to make some agreement, or let's say more correctly, to dictate some agreements to Iranians. And if Iran doesn't accept such a thing, which I doubt do, then Americans would consider attack against Iran. But for attacking, they would actually do only calculations. Iran has been clear in its message to the Americans and to the countries in the region that any attack on Iran would not be a limited attack, and it would be interpreted as an all-out war, and the response would be actually the same way, an all-out response, and it would be very harsh and actually diverse. And it would include not only the American military bases, but also all the countries in the region, and of course, the Israeli regime as a legitimate target for Iran.
Mr. Hamid Raza, I also want to...
Just a message.
Yeah.
Just a message that the Americans had sent to Iran was that they had asked Iran to evacuate one of the military bases so that the Americans can attack, and then they stop everything, and Iran did not accept, because if there's an attack at any side, there would be some reaction and response from the Iranian side. So that suggestion and proposal was rejected by Iran.
I want to get one final word, but at the end of the day, you know, there also needs to be some sort of thinking in Iran, I'm sure, about a succession plan for who will take over after Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, because he's 86 years old, he's not getting young. You know, in Venezuela, again, it's not comparable. Iran and Venezuela are completely opposite. But if effectively what the Trump administration used is military force and got a regime, not a regime change, but a change at the top of the government, the vice president replaced the president. Is there any visible successor or even a path for succession for who will take over from the supreme leader?
As you may know, Ayatollah Khamenei is the second leader after the Islamic Revolution, and we have all the procedures in the constitution that suggest how the next leader would be appointed. And we have all these mechanisms and all the discussions. We have the Assembly of Experts, who is responsible mainly for actually monitoring the leader and appointing the next leader whenever it is necessary. So we have all the procedures. Even if there is any incident for the current leader, they would easily appoint the next one. Categorically, what they do is that every 6 months, they have some discussions, of course, secretly, and they discuss possible people, possible potential next leaders to be considered, and they discuss that every 6 months. It's not for now, it has been since the year that Ayatollah Khamenei was appointed. Every year, twice a year, they are gathering and discussing certain things, because anytime there might be some incidents, and death is something that comes to everyone. So this consideration is always on the ground, on the table for the Assembly of Experts, and there is no serious matter about that.
Okay, Mr. Hamid Raza Ghulamzadeh, thank you very much for joining us here on News 18. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
India's renowned economists, analysts, and policymakers will dissect every aspect of Budget 2026.
This budget should be a budget of consolidation. The government to take steps which will generate large-scale employment in the country.
We need to really make changes fast, is to improve productivity in agriculture.
If you lower tax slabs, it will help the middle class. You will put more money.
In fact, the government must have its thrust on consumer spending, as well as employment generation is most important for the government.
Watch them live on Budget Day, only on CNN News 18. This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
Maharashtra politics in flux after the tragic death of Deputy Chief Minister Ajit Pawar, while the NCP is now grappling with the one big question: who next? Sources within the Pawar faction say his wife, who is also a Rajya Sabha MP, Sunetra Pawar, could be elevated as national president of the party. In the meanwhile, his younger son Jay Pawar is also being considered to contest the Baramati by-poll and may even find a place in the state cabinet. Will he take over the portfolios of Ajit Pawar? That question still remains. As the Pawar family weighs its options, a formal communication is also likely to reach Chief Minister Devendra Fadnavis very soon, informing him about the redistribution of Ajit Pawar's portfolios. With Ajit Pawar's passing, the battle for control of the NCP has just begun. Ajit Pawar faction of the NCP, remember, currently divided into two camps. One wishes to remain with the Mahayuti alliance. There's another camp that seeks reunification with Sharad Pawar's faction. In the meanwhile, the BJP is keen to keep Ajit Pawar faction within the Mahayuti alliance. So all of those comments, reactions are still trickling in. Mayuresh, in fact, has been spearheading the coverage for us. He's been getting us non-stop reactions also from the different factions of the NCP. Let's first up hear it.
What exactly had happened? Was that a merger on the card? Was that merger about to happen somewhere around first week in February when the Zilla Parishads Zilla Parishad the results were out?
No, both the factions of the party were of the opinion that we should merge because this is the time where if we cannot exist separately, we should merge. And so we had some meetings with Honorable late Ajit Dada, but actually the elections were declared, and so we decided that let us contest first on this symbol of watch, that is Gadiar, and then we can take a second step of merger and all. So that was a prima facie discussion which happened, and all of a sudden this sad incident happened. So now there is a full stop. No, we both are of that mindset, but let us see how the situation evolves or happens in the future. But both are of the same opinion.
What is next for both the parties?
We had been together since last 30-40 years, since the party in the year 1999 we had formed. If the both factions, both the parties, like-minded people, if they try to do that in the same direction, I think some positive